In 1994, when Princess Diana encountered Dr. Mark Stevens at Great Ormond Street Hospital, both were angry. Diana wanted to launch a new campaign about childhood diseases, but Dr. Stevens vehemently opposed it. "You only come here for photo opportunities. You don't see the real problems," he shouted. Diana's response and what happened next would change Dr. Stevens forever. The autumn rain was beating against the windows of Great Ormond Street Hospital as Princess Diana made her way through the familiar corridors. It was October 1994, and she had visited this children's hospital dozens of times over the years, but today felt different. Today, she wasn't here for a scheduled royal visit with photographers and carefully orchestrated meetings. Today, she had come unannounced, driven by a burning frustration that had been building for months. Diana had spent the morning reading newspaper articles criticizing her latest charitable efforts, calling them publicity stunts, and questioning whether her high-profile visits actually helped anyone. The criticism stung because part of her wondered if there was truth to it. Was she really making a difference, or was she just a privileged woman playing at caring? She had dressed simply, a navy coat and minimal jewelry, hoping to blend in and observe the hospital's daily reality without the usual royal protocol. Her protection officer, Inspector James Crawford, followed at a discreet distance, clearly uncomfortable with this impromptu visit. As Diana walked through the pediatric wing, she was struck by how different the atmosphere felt when cameras weren't present. The corridors were busier, noisier, more chaotic. Nurses moved with urgent efficiency, and she could hear the sounds that were usually muffled during royal visits: children crying, machines beeping, worried parents speaking in hushed tones. She paused outside the oncology ward, watching through the glass as a young nurse tried to comfort a crying child who couldn't have been more than 5 years old. The scene reminded her of William and Harry at that age, and she felt a familiar tightness in her chest. "Excuse me, can I help you?" Diana turned to find a tall, stern-looking man in a white coat approaching her. He appeared to be in his early 40s, with graying hair and tired eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. His name tag read, "Dr. Mark Stevens, Pediatric Oncology." "I'm Diana Spencer," she said, using her maiden name as she sometimes did when she wanted to avoid immediate recognition. "I was hoping to speak with someone about the hospital's current needs." Dr. Stevens studied her face for a moment, and she saw the exact moment recognition dawned. His expression shifted from puzzled to annoyed. "Princess Diana," he said, his tone decidedly cool. "I should have known. Are you here for another photo opportunity?" The bluntness of his question caught Diana off guard. She was accustomed to deference, even from those who disagreed with her privately. "Actually, no," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm here because I want to understand what's really happening here. I want to help." Dr. Stevens let out a short, bitter laugh. "Help? With all due respect, Your Royal Highness, your kind of help isn't what these children need." Diana felt a flash of anger. "And what exactly is that supposed to mean?" "It means," Dr. Stevens said, his voice rising slightly, "that you come here, take some photos with sick children, make some speeches about raising awareness, and then you leave. Meanwhile, we're still struggling with the same problems we had before your visit." "That's not fair," Diana protested. "I've helped raise millions of pounds for this hospital. Money that goes to public relations and new facilities that look good in photographs." Dr. Stevens shot back. "But what about the day-to-day reality? What about the fact that we're understaffed? What about the fact that some of these children are waiting months for treatments because we don't have enough resources?" Diana felt her own anger building. "So what are you suggesting? That I should just stay away?" "I'm suggesting," Dr. Stevens said, his voice now clearly audible to others in the corridor, "that maybe instead of launching another publicity campaign, you should spend some time understanding what we actually need." Several nurses and other staff members had begun to notice the heated exchange. Diana was acutely aware that this conversation was becoming public, but she found she didn't care. For once, someone was being completely honest with her. "You think I don't understand?" Diana's voice was sharp. "You think I just float through here taking pictures without seeing what's happening?" "Do you?" Dr. Stevens challenged. "When was the last time you sat with a family while they got devastating news? When was the last time you held a child's hand while they went through chemotherapy? When was the last time you dealt with the bureaucracy that prevents us from giving these children the care they deserve?" Diana stared at him, feeling a mixture of fury and something else, a recognition that his anger came from the same place as her own frustration. "You're right," she said quietly, and Dr. Stevens looked surprised by her admission. "I don't know what those things are like. But I know what it's like to feel helpless. I know what it's like to care about something desperately and feel like nothing you do makes a real difference. Dr. Stevens' expression softened slightly, but his stance remained defensive. Then why do you keep doing the same things? Why the photo ops and the campaigns? Because, Diana said, her voice becoming passionate, it's the only way I know how to help. It's the only power I have. But if it's not working, if it's not really helping these children, then I need to find another way. The corridor had grown quiet around them. Other staff members were openly listening now, clearly fascinated by this unprecedented exchange. Dr. Stevens studied Diana's face, perhaps looking for signs of insincerity. I'm proposing that you show me, really show me, not a sanitized royal visit, but the reality, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and then tell me how I can actually help. Dr. Stevens was quiet for a long moment. You want to see the reality? Yes. It's not pretty. It's not something you can fix with a charity gala or a media campaign. I understand. Dr. Stevens glanced around at the watching staff members, then back at Diana. All right, but we do this my way. No photographers, no protocol officers, no advanced teams. Just you, seeing what we actually deal with every day. Diana nodded, agreed. What followed was unlike any hospital visit Diana had ever experienced. Dr. Stevens led her through the ward with no ceremony, no preparation, no careful staging. They went into rooms where children were receiving treatments, where parents were getting difficult news, where the staff was dealing with the countless small crises that make up hospital life. In one room, Diana met Sarah, a 7-year-old girl undergoing treatment for leukemia. Unlike the carefully selected children she usually met during royal visits, Sarah was having a bad day. She was nauseous from chemotherapy, frightened, and angry at everyone around her. I don't want to talk to anyone, Sarah told Diana firmly when Dr. Stevens introduced them. That's okay, Diana said, sitting down in a chair beside the bed. You don't have to talk. Can I just sit here for a bit? Sarah regarded her suspiciously but didn't object. Diana sat quietly while Dr. Stevens checked Sarah's chart and adjusted her IV. After a few minutes, Sarah spoke. Are you really a princess? I am, Diana said, but right now I'm just someone who wanted to visit. Princesses are supposed to be happy all the time, Sarah observed. Who told you that? Everyone knows that. Princesses live in castles and everything is perfect. Diana smiled sadly. I live in a palace, and I can tell you that things are definitely not perfect. Sometimes princesses feel scared and sad and angry just like everyone else. Sarah considered this. Do you ever get sick? I do. Different kinds of sick than you, but yes. Does it hurt? Sometimes, Diana said honestly. But you know what I've learned? Sometimes the things that hurt us also make us stronger. As they talked, Dr. Stevens watched with growing amazement. He had expected Diana to be uncomfortable, to make polite conversation and leave quickly. Instead, she seemed completely at ease with Sarah's difficult questions and raw emotions. In the next room, they met the parents of a 10-year-old boy named Michael who had been diagnosed with brain cancer. The parents, John and Lily Morgan, were exhausted and overwhelmed. They had been living at the hospital for weeks, taking turns sleeping in an uncomfortable chair beside their son's bed. We don't know how we're going to manage financially, Lily confided to Dr. Stevens, not noticing Diana at first. John's already used all his vacation time, and we can't afford for him to take unpaid leave indefinitely. When she realized who Diana was, Lily looked embarrassed. I'm sorry, Your Royal Highness. I didn't mean to burden you with our problems. Please, Diana said, don't apologize. This is exactly what I need to hear. Tell me more about the financial pressures families face. What Diana learned over the next several hours challenged everything she thought she knew about the hospital's needs. She discovered that while the medical care was excellent, families often struggled with the ancillary costs, parking fees, meals, lost wages from time off work, travel expenses for those who lived far away. She learned that the staff was indeed overworked, not because of a lack of funding for medical equipment, but because of bureaucratic constraints that prevented them from hiring sufficient support personnel. She discovered that some of the most needed improvements were small, practical things that would never make headlines: better sleeping facilities for parents, more flexible scheduling for treatments, improved communication systems. As the day progressed, Dr. Trekesin found his anger being replaced by something else. Diana wasn't just listening politely, she was asking detailed questions, taking notes, and clearly processing what she was learning. Why hasn't anyone told me these things before? Diana asked during a brief break in the hospital cafeteria. Because, Dr. Stevens said, when you come for official visits, we're told to present the positive aspects. No one wants to complain to a member of the royal family. But how can I help if I don't know what the real problems are? Dr. Stevens looked at her across the small cafeteria table. Can I ask you something? Why does this matter so much to you? Diana was quiet for a moment. Because I know what it's like to feel powerless. I know what it's like to be in a system that seems designed to help you, but actually leaves you feeling more alone than ever. These children, these families, they're fighting battles that most people can't even imagine. If I can use my position to make their fight even a little bit easier, then maybe there's a point to all of this. When they returned to the ward, Dr. Stevens introduced Diana to Maria Santos, a young nurse who had been working double shifts because of staffing shortages. Tell the princess about your idea for the parent support program, Dr. Stevens encouraged. Maria looked nervous but began explaining her concept for a comprehensive support system that would address the non-medical needs of families dealing with childhood cancer, financial counseling, emotional support, practical assistance with daily needs. It's just an idea, Maria said apologetically. We've proposed it several times, but there's never funding for programs that don't directly relate to medical treatment. Diana listened intently, asking questions about implementation, costs, and potential impacts. By the end of the conversation, Maria was speaking with growing enthusiasm about her vision. As the afternoon wore on, Dr. Stevens realized that something fundamental had shifted in his perception of Diana. She wasn't just making polite conversation, she was genuinely engaging with the complexities of the hospital's challenges. The turning point came when they visited Tommy, a 12-year-old boy who had been in the hospital for months. Tommy was intelligent and articulate, and he had strong opinions about his treatment experience. The worst part isn't the medicine or the procedures, Tommy told Diana. The worst part is how everyone talks about you like you're not there. They discuss your case and your prognosis and your options, but they don't really talk to you. Diana nodded. I understand that feeling. Sometimes adults think they're protecting you by not including you in difficult conversations. But it's my body, Tommy said. Shouldn't I get to know what's happening to it? Diana looked at Dr. Stevens. How do you handle that balance between protecting children and respecting their right to understand their own situations? The question led to a lengthy discussion about patient autonomy, age-appropriate communication, and the challenges of involving children in medical decision-making. Diana's questions were thoughtful and showed a genuine understanding of the ethical complexities involved. By early evening, Dr. Stevens found himself in his office with Diana, discussing not just the hospital's immediate needs, but broader issues of healthcare policy, resource allocation, and systemic change. You know, he said, I owe you an apology. When I saw you this morning, I assumed you were just another privileged person looking for good publicity. Diana smiled wryly. To be fair, that's probably what I have been, at least partially. But today has shown me how much I've been missing. So what happens now? Dr. Stevens asked. Do you go back to royal visits and charity galas? Diana was quiet for a moment. What if I didn't? What if instead of another publicity campaign, we tried something different? What do you mean? Diana pulled out the notebook she had been using throughout the day. What if we created a new kind of program? Something that addresses all the issues you've shown me today, the financial pressures on families, the staffing challenges, the communication gaps, the need for comprehensive support. Dr. Stevens leaned forward. That would require a significant commitment, not just money, but time, ongoing involvement, real partnership. I know, Diana said, and it would mean giving up some of the traditional ways I've tried to help. No more photo opportunities, no more ceremonial visits, just real work. Dr. Stevens studied her face. You're serious about this. Completely, but I can't do it alone. I need partners who understand the real challenges. People like you, like Maria, like the families we met today. What Diana proposed was revolutionary for royal charitable work. Instead of lending her name to existing organizations or starting a traditional charity, she wanted to create a comprehensive support system that would be embedded within the hospital itself. The program would address not just medical needs, but the full spectrum of challenges that families faced when dealing with childhood illness. The program would include financial assistance, emotional support, practical help with daily needs, advocacy within the healthcare system, and long-term follow-up care. Most importantly, it would be designed and run by the people who understood the needs best, medical professionals, social workers, and families who had lived through the experience. I want my role to be supporter, not figurehead, Diana explained. I want to use my platform to raise awareness and funds, but I want the program to be run by people who actually know what they're doing. Dr. Stevens was amazed by the scope and thoughtfulness of Diana's proposal. This is completely different from anything I've seen from royal charitable efforts. Because, Diana said, today you showed me that what I was doing before wasn't enough. You challenged me to do better, and this is my attempt to rise to that challenge. Over the following weeks, Diana worked with Dr. Stevens and other hospital staff to develop a detailed plan for what would become the Comprehensive Family Support Initiative. The program would be funded through Diana's charitable foundation, but would be operationally independent, allowing medical professionals to make decisions based on patient needs rather than donor preferences. The initiative launched 6 months later with none of the fanfare that usually accompanied Diana's charitable efforts. Instead of a gala or media event, the program began quietly, with Diana working alongside staff to implement the support services. The impact was immediate and profound. The press conference made headlines around the world, not because Diana had announced a new charity, but because she had fundamentally challenged the entire model of celebrity philanthropy. Other members of the royal family were reportedly shocked by Diana's candid admission of the inadequacies of traditional royal charity. Some criticized her for airing dirty laundry publicly, but the public response was overwhelmingly positive. Donations to Great Ormond Street Hospital increased dramatically, but more importantly, they were now targeted at the specific needs Diana and Dr. Stevens had identified. Other hospitals began receiving similar targeted support as donors became more educated about real needs versus perceived needs. Dr. Stevens found himself invited to speak at conferences around the world about the gap between celebrity charity and effective philanthropy. Princess Diana did something unprecedented, he would tell audiences. She used her fame not to promote herself, but to promote honesty about charity work. Diana continued her association with the hospital, but in a completely different capacity. She attended staff meetings, participated in policy discussions, and became an advocate for systematic healthcare improvements. When she appeared publicly, it was to highlight the work of people like Dr. Stevens, not to promote herself. The transformation in their relationship was complete. Dr. Stevens, who had once seen her as a privileged interloper, became one of her most trusted advisors. "You know what I learned?" he told her months later. "Anger and confrontation can lead to real change, but only if both sides are willing to listen and admit when they're wrong." Diana smiled, "And I learned that being comfortable with criticism is more important than being comfortable with praise. Your anger that day forced me to confront uncomfortable truths about my own work." But for Diana, the program's success was measured in smaller, more personal terms. It was measured in families like the Morgans, who were able to focus on their son's recovery instead of worrying about financial ruin. It was measured in children like Tommy, who felt heard and respected in their own medical care. It was measured in staff like Maria, whose innovative ideas were finally being implemented and funded. Years later, Dr. Stevens would reflect on that heated confrontation in the hospital corridor. Sometimes, he would say, the most important conversations are the ones that start with conflict. Diana and I disagreed fundamentally about the role of celebrity in healthcare, but instead of walking away from that disagreement, we used it as a starting point for something better. Diana often thought about that day as well. The anger and frustration she had felt walking into the hospital had been transformed into something constructive. Stevens' harsh criticism had stung, but it had also freed her from the constraints of traditional royal charity work. "He was right to be angry," she would later tell a friend. "I was doing the minimum, telling myself it was enough because it was more than other people were doing. He forced me to see that being better than average isn't the same as being good enough." The heated confrontation that had seemed so destructive in the moment had actually been the beginning of one of Diana's most meaningful contributions. It had shown her that real change required real commitment, real partnership, and real willingness to be challenged and to grow. And it had proven that sometimes the most unexpected outcomes come from the most difficult conversations.